Let's move on to the next chapter, making the research problem manageable. As stressed in the previous chapter, the research problem establishes the goal of the research effort. The subproblems, however, suggests ways of approaching the goal in a more manageable ways. Research is based upon a clear understanding of every detail in the process. Hence, a researcher has to eliminate any possibility of misunderstanding in certain matters relating to his study on a particular research problem. This can be done by defining key terms in the problem, identifying the variables of the study, delimiting research, stating assumptions, and formulating hypotheses. This chapter centers on making a research manageable. After studying this chapter, you should be able to define key terms in your research problems conceptually and operationally, explain the term variable, and identify the types of variables usually investigated in research. Identify the dependent, and moderating variables in your proposed study. Point out and expound the different ways by which a study on a research problem may be delimited. Formulate basic assumptions in your study based on a statement of your research problems. Differentiate between the following paired types of hypothesis: alternative and null, directional and non-directional. Cite specific reasons for formulating hypotheses in a proposed study, and formulate appropriate null hypotheses based on your proposed problems for study. In any study, you need to define the key terms or concepts in the statement of the problem in order to avoid confusion or ambiguity, according to Kumar 1996. Examine the following statement of the research problem. The research attempts to probe on the relationship between the perceived management style of middle-level managers and faculty behavior in one autonomous university in the National Capital Region during the academic year 2007 and 2008. What are the key terms that should be defined in the aforementioned statement of the problem? To ensure clarity and focus, the following terms have to be defined: management styles, middle-level managers, and faculty behavior. How then should these terms be defined? Researchers usually define key terms either conceptually or operationally. Conceptual definition is the definition of the term as given by the authorities or experts in a particular discipline. On the other hand, operational definition is the researcher's own definition of the term based on how it will be used in his study. This kind of definition requires a researcher to specify actions or operations necessary to identify and measure the terms. Consider the following definitions of the key terms in the previously stated research problem. Management style refers to the manager or executive distinctive mode of managing an organization in terms of his performance of the managerial function of planning, organizing, staffing, directing, controlling, and budgeting, according to Stoner 2004. In this study, the term shall be taken to mean as the college dean's mode of managing the college or academic center under his charge in the following key terms: results, areas in educational management, student development, faculty and staff development, curriculum and instruction, financial resources and physical facilities development, research and community linkages, and outreach. The first definition is conceptual, while the second is operational. Why define key terms in the problems? Fishers, as cited by Sevilla 1993, say that definition of the key terms establishes the rules and procedures the researcher will use to measure the variables of the study. However, it provides an ambiguous meaning into terms that otherwise can be interpreted in different ways. We have to identify the variables of the study. To ensure objectivity in the study of an identified problem, the researcher has to be clear as to what variables are to be examined or investigated. A variable is property or characteristics that takes on different values according to Kerlinger 1986 and Wersma 1981. It is a symbol to which number or values can be attached or assigned. The most commonly used classification of variables includes independent, dependent, interviewing, and moderating variables. When we say independent variables, the cost supposed to be responsible for bringing about changes in the independent variables. When we say intervening variables, a variable whose existence is inferred but that cannot be manipulated or controlled. So when we say moderator variable, a variable that may or may not be controlled but has an effect on the research situation. Let us illustrate the above concepts by recalling the research problem earlier mentioned on the relationships of perceived management style of the middle level managers and faculty behavior. In the said study, perceived management style is the independent variable, as it will be used to explain possible differences in the behavior patterns of respondent faculty members. On the other hand, faculty behavior is the dependent variable since it is effect or the effect that will be determined as consequences of the college dean's employment of the particular management style. What factors other than management style can affect the behavior patterns of the faculty? This may include commitment to the job or the organization, level of professionalism, and the work values among others. So those only are example of intervening variables that could affect the management style. As regards possible moderator variables, the following can be considered. Ano na siya mga consideration na gamit sa moderator variables? Pinaka magamit ang edad, age, gender, civil status, length of service with the university, educational attainment, college assignment, teaching performance rating. Why are these moderator variable? They are moderator variables as variances in faculty members' behavior pattern, as well as their dean's management style can possibly be accounted for by their differences in aforementioned personal and professional attributes. According to Wersma 1991, when a moderator variable is controlled, it becomes an intervening factor. When a researcher becomes aware of the existence of the moderator variable and assesses its effect on the dependent variable, it became a controlled variable. On contrary, when the researcher is unable to manipulate or measure the potential moderator variable, then it automatically is an intervening variable. One way of making a study on a problem more focused is by delimiting it. By delimiting research is simply giving full disclosure of what the researcher intends to do or does not intend to do. When a researcher is able to set a scope and delimitation of his study, he can make his research more manageable. At the same time, this can direct him to the choice of research method to employ. So how can a researcher delimit his research on an identified problem? A researcher can set the scope and delimitation of his study by focusing on the following. Purpose of the study, time coverage of the investigation, geographical coverage of the inquiry, variables to be studied, specific indicators of variables, type and size of the respondent of the study, and data collection tools to be used in data gathering. Those items should be reflected in your scope and delimitation of study. How to delimit a study is illustrated below. This study attempts to establish the significance of relationship between the personality preferences and employees' job satisfaction in selected business processing outsourcing BPO companies in Metro Manila during the second quarter of 2008. Employees' personality preferences shall be determined based on Myers-Briggs type indicator based on Carl Jung's 4 psychological types. Personality preferences of the respondents, however, shall be described in terms of the following polar scales: introvert, extrovert, sensor, intuitor, thinker, feeler, and judger, perceiver. Level of job satisfaction among the respondents shall be reckoned in terms of the following variables: satisfaction with company policy and administration, satisfaction with growth, advancement, and job recognition, satisfaction with nature of work, satisfaction with interpersonal relations, and satisfaction with salary and fringe benefits. Nonetheless, levels of job satisfaction in terms of the aforementioned factors shall be described in terms of the following categories: very satisfied, satisfied, somewhat satisfied, dissatisfied, and very dissatisfied. Inasmuch as the study shall be undertaken in Metro Manila, generalizations that can be derived from findings of this research shall be applicable only in those presently employed by the subjects BPOs in the aforementioned research locale. So those are example of on how to make your scope and delimitation of study. Okay, to enhance understanding of the problem to be studied, the researcher needs to state his assumptions. You have to make your assumptions, no? An assumption in research is a statement the researcher will presume to be true but will no longer be proven. Nagkakaakala ba kita na anong suwalira, ano na mong ang hinahimo na natin kasi muna, kita mong tao nga, bahay nga busong, balaan mo, ginano, chik pinamataan dyan, kung kihiban na, ano. Ito, gahimo nga, kaaka lang. So, actually, in research, researcher also need to state his assumption, no, makakaakala ka, make your own assumption. No? Nonetheless, it has to be based on the research problem, no? Ano gid bala, no? For example, na bahay na busong, ano gid bala ang rason nga nabusong siya, mura sa partner, no? So, ano ang cost, ano ang pinaka-main problem nga nabusong tanan? So, you have to determine, so you have to mangkuton mo gitana, no? Interviewin mo tanan para mamalaan mo nga mo gali lang alinan nga nabusong si Inday, no? In the study of the interpersonal values of nursing interns, the researcher came up with the following basic assumptions. Ano siya? So, example of personal value of the nursing interns, no? Ang researcher na came up ka ng assumption. So, these are example of assumptions, no? That nursing interns have their own concept of what is good and desirable for themselves. That an individual's interpersonal values can be identified and measured with the use of an approved inventory. That there are factors that affect an individual's profession and enactment of a particular interpersonal value, and that Gordon's survey of interpersonal value is culture-free and can be used in determining the interpersonal values professed and enacted by Filipino college students. So those are only examples of assumptions. No? Let's proceed to the stating of the hypothesis of the study. Formulation of the hypothesis of the study is another important consideration in making one's research manageable. But what is a hypothesis in research? Any idea? A hypothesis is but a predictive statement that represents the researcher's tentative answer to his statement of the research problem. Predictive means predict ka lang, no? Gaka-aka ka lang, no? Aside from ensuring clarity, the hypothesis serves the following function in research, no? Ano ang pinaka-function ng hypothesis nga? So it provides focus to the study. Para mo lang na-focusan mo. It tells the researcher what data to gather, no? Para kung ano lang ang data ang focusan mo, kung ano lang data ang pupunon mo, no? It enhances objectivity in the study. Ano si objective? Fairness, no? Gabasi kagit sa is a statement of the problem, no? It enables the researcher to contribute to the formulation of a theory and bridge the gaps in the body of knowledge, no? So dyan ka na sa ating hypothesis naka-contribute to the formulation of theory. Dyan ka kayo maka-come up kita kang theory, no? That bridge the gaps in the body of knowledge. When constructing hypothesis, you must remember that the hypothesis should be simple and specific. Diretso na yung liko-liko. Be stated in an empirically testable form, be related to the existing body of knowledge, and should indicate the specific nature of connection between or among variables. As already emphasized, the hypothesis is a specific testable prediction. This prediction can be stated either in a null or alternative form. A null hypothesis is a statement indicating the non-existence of difference, relationship, or association between two or more variables or factors. On the other hand, an alternative hypothesis states that the nature of the connection between or among the variables that the researcher expects, of course, between these two variables. The null hypothesis is often used in many researches in the academy, since no statistical tests have been developed in testing the alternative or research hypothesis. Let us examine examples on how the hypothesis is stated in the null and alternative forms. Example: problem: how do liberal arts students compare with education students in their level of assertiveness? So when it comes to null hypothesis, it states that the liberal arts and education students do not differ significantly in their level of assertiveness. No? There is no significant difference in the level of assertiveness of liberal arts and education students. When we say alternative hypothesis, it states liberal arts and education students differ significantly in their level of assertiveness. So there is a significant difference in the level of assertiveness of liberal arts and students or education students. So, example number 2, problem: how significant is the association between the level of emotional readiness of the nursing interns of GRU and their performance in RLE? In null hypothesis, the level of emotional readiness of the nursing intern of GRU is not significantly associated with their performance in RLE. There is no significant association between the level of emotional readiness of the nursing interns of GRU and their performance in RLE. And the level of emotional readiness of the nursing interns of GRU is independent of their performance in RLU. But when it comes to in terms to alternative hypothesis, the problem becomes the level of emotional readiness of the nursing interns of GRU is significantly associated with their performance in RLE. There is a significant association between the level of emotional readiness of the nursing interns of GRU and their performance in RLE. So, hypothesis can also be directional or non-directional. A directional hypothesis is one indicating the specific directions. No? For example, higher, lower, greater, lesser, or more, or less. A researcher expects to emerge in the relationship or difference. No? An example of a directional hypothesis is the girls will obtain higher mental ability scores than boys. So a non-directional hypothesis is one that does not make specific prediction about the outcome of the study. So example, so there will be significant differences in the level of self-concepts of grade 10 students when they are grouped according to their family socioeconomic status. So since hypothesis testing is what research is all about, a careful and precise statement of research hypothesis is vital for the research project to be worthwhile. So that ends the lesson on how on making the research problem manageable. For any questions, you may write your comment in the comment box below. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you.